All right, welcome everybody to our webinar. We're going to get started in just a second. If you would, please write in chat where you're coming from. And today we're asking what your favorite fall food or beverage is. We are excited that the weather is starting to cool down. I particularly am excited because I'm in Florida and we don't really get seasons. So when it gets cool, it's nice to dig into some fall themed items. So tell us where you're coming from in chat and what your favorite fall edible is. We'll get started in just a second. I think everyone can chat. Yeah. I don't see any chats coming in.
Did we make sure chat's open? Oh, there we go. Good.
Yeah.
Woo.
Ooh, taffy apple. Hot tea. Yes.
Spin wheels.
I think I'm going to have to go eat after this meeting. So much good stuff. Candy corn. Thank you, everyone who's coming in. Please tell us where you're from and what your favorite fall edible item is. We're going to get started in just a second while we let some people join. We're really glad you can join us today. This is an exciting webinar to have some of our real customers sharing their stories.
Every day is fall for Rick, I think.
Yeah. Embrace it. I'm an everyday is Halloween person, so I'm for that. All right, we've got a few more people joining. I'm going to give them a second before we kick off. Tell us where you're coming from and what your favorite fall edible is. All things pumpkin, yeah. One thing to note, your chat will default to hosts and panelists. So the drop down, make sure it's changed to everyone so everybody can see your chat comments. We're going to give just another minute. I see the attendee numbers are just jumping. So I'm going to give a second while that stabilizes, and then we will kick off. Tell us where you're coming from in the chat and what your favorite fall edible is. And make sure to change your chat drop down to everyone so that everyone can see your chat. It defaults to panelists and hosts. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So hello, I am Kristen Powers. I am the Director of Marketing and Customer Engagement at Cidi Labs. I want to welcome you to a very special webinar sharing our real customer stories with practical tips that can help you at your institution working on your Canvas courses. Today's webinar is called Capturing and Scaling Quality Canvas Course Design with Boston College's Story. In this webinar, we'll be exploring the timeline of Boston College as they went from the pandemic rush to get everything online to a place now where they're scaling their best work. Along the way, they learned some really interesting things about how to use DesignPLUS to open the door for conversations about quality course design. You'll also see some really exciting examples of what's possible with the DesignPLUS tool today. First, we're going to cover a little bit of housekeeping. Next slide, please. So we are recording this webinar and we will share it as soon as possible, probably tomorrow, along with any useful links that we share along the way. If you've missed any of our previous webinars, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. That's where you can find any of our history of webinars we've had. We've had some really great ones this year, especially along the Design Matters Live series. And we have a number of customer ones as well as some product-centric ones that you can find in there. We're also using the Q&A feature today. So if you have any particular questions around the products or the tools that we're showing, how the team, John and Tim, did some things, please use the Q&A. I will be marking things as we'll answer later live because we've got some time set aside at the end. Anything that we can answer along the way, we will answer though. If you are using chat, make sure that your drop-down says everyone because it defaults to just the hosts and panelists, and we want to see all your comments and questions along the way. And if this is your first time joining us for a Cidi Labs webinar, let me tell you a little bit about Cidi Labs. Next slide, please. So Cidi Labs is a small company comprised of instructional designers, educators, and people who care about improving educational access and quality. We have a suite of clever and affordable tools for Canvas that support designers, managers, and educators across the Canvas course lifecycle. We also have a Slack community, and we offer a wide range of on-demand training and live support options. Many of our customers always comment about how happy our team always seems, and it's true. We love our jobs, and we get to work with amazing customers in our amazing community. Speaking of our community, let me introduce our special guest today. So we are joined today by two amazing people from Boston College. John FitzGibbon is the Associate Director for Digital Learning Innovation at CDIL, Center for Design, Innovation, and Learning at Boston College. His role is to explore the use of digital tools to enhance teaching and learning practices in both online and face-to-face courses at Boston College. That's one thing that we'll talk about a little bit today is the move to face-to-face with these designs as well. Tim Lindgren is an Assistant Director for Design Innovation at CDIL. Apparently their offices are next to each other so they can spy on each other what they're doing, where he works with faculty and staff around the university to explore technologies for learning and help design transformative educational experiences. Joining us from Cidi Labs is Kenneth Larsen, our Chief Instructional Designer and co-founder. Kenneth started hacking Canvas when he was at Utah State University working in the Center for Innovation, Design, and Instruction, similar to CDIL, but this one is CIDI, which is how we get the Cidi and Cidi Labs. That work led to the very first software that we inevitably became, DesignPLUS, that was known as Kennethware originally. And I'm going to be behind the scenes today. I'll be sharing links and managing chat. If you have anything, reach out to me. But I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who's going to go over your agenda for the day.
Thanks, Kristen. Here's where we're going to be going today as we share a few things that we've been doing at Boston College and ways we've been collaborating. We'll give you a little background of sort of where we're coming from in our context, since that's often helpful for people to know institutionally and how we got to using Cidi Labs. And then we'll go through kind of how our use of Cidi Labs evolved over the years and where we are now as we continue to move into using new DesignPLUS and doing some new things in the upcoming year. And then a few key takeaways that we'll leave you with that seem to have really risen to the top for us. And then just have some time for questions and discussion. So in terms of this is our timeline of our journey, and starting with, pre-Canvas, pre-DesignPLUS, starting with, we've been with Canvas since 2013. So we're a fairly early adopter. And then it took us a few years before DesignPLUS was available and we started using it. And then we'll go through how we progressed from there to starting building online programs, to going through the pandemic, to scaling some of the things that we had learned from those early experiences, and now looking towards a general rollout. So we started really with online courses, and now we're moving more towards rolling it out to the rest of the campus. So I'll turn it over to John to give it a little background on kind of how we got started with things in the early Canvas days.
Thanks so much, Tim. So Tim is our design guru, so he's going to talk a lot about the technical aspects of it and working one-on-one faculty and programs and how we use Cidi Labs to achieve a lot of those goals. But what I'm going to talk about is more on the administrative side of things and how we've been able to leverage Tim's great designs and his work with faculty to achieve a whole bunch of academic programmatic goals that really would be very challenging, very difficult to achieve without building out templates and using the features of Cidi Labs to achieve that. So if you don't already know, after a big victory over Florida State a few weeks ago, BC is a Jesuit institution, but more importantly, it's very, very focused on residential experience. So if you've ever been to Boston College, they put a lot of money into a very beautiful campus, and that's a key calling card of the institution. So when we were founded in 2019, we were told BC is not going to go online. It's not going to happen. They're going to fight back against it. They're going to push back against it. But because of market competitive issues, we basically had to kind of go online, and our center was founded to basically help to achieve that. So that's a kind of wider context. It wasn't like this huge institutional push for it. There was a lot of internal resistance to anything related to online, anything related to investing a lot of money in Canvas and things like that. And we really had to fight our corner. If you want to move on, Tim. So that meant there was no top-down approach. And in a good sense, and Tim's going to talk about that in a moment, that gave us huge scope to get things wrong, try things out. But I think more importantly, it allowed us to work one-on-one with faculty to create individualized templates and really kind of figure out what we wanted to achieve as an online institution. And so the designs that Tim was able to leverage Cidi Labs for then became very personalized, very beautiful, and spoke a lot to the institution itself. So we had this really nice space to kind of work with just 2 online programs and a handful of faculty and really kind of kick the tires on Cidi Labs, see what it could do, come up with our own design patterns, really building a unique BC brand. And that becomes very important. If you want to move on, Tim.
And I want to say here, just in terms of context, this was before we got Cidi Labs. This was all, you know, there's a lot of inconsistency, and the online course design process gave us a chance to really experiment in this way that we're now starting to bring back to the rest of the university. But that was our chance, you know, to sort of move a little bit beyond what the defaults were for Canvas without DesignPLUS.
So I think Tim will take over after this and talk about the design elements of it. But from a more administrative point of view, what's been really interesting is that we've kind of taken on an internal OPM role. I'm sure many of you are battling with OPMs and having to deal with all that kind of stuff. At the time we were founded as an internal OPM competitor, other programs were using OPMs, but it's always hard to communicate what we can bring as a team, where OPMs are flashy marketing and, you know, professional presentations and all that. But with the designs Tim created in Cidi Labs, we're able to literally show the difference between them. And like just what I talked about just before, because Tim was able to leverage Cidi Labs to work individually with faculty and programs, we had these very boutique designs that spoke both to the institution, to the program itself, and then also that resonated with faculty members as well. And very, very quickly, we were able to compare that to their terrible experience with OPMs. And so because of that terrible experience they had with OPMs and that kind of thing, and building out things in Canvas didn't go as well. They didn't have really good design chops. It didn't really speak to unique BC brand, all that kind of stuff. We were able to engage with a lot of legacy skepticism about online learning. So faculty came in very skeptical about it. Administrators came in very skeptical about it. But because of these great designs that we were able to develop, and in doing so, build great relationships with faculty, administrators could literally see the difference between working with us and investing with us than with an OPM. And that just became a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy then, where they saw that the BC specific designs were able to create, and then we became the BC kind of online kind of brand, because we're able to represent what faculty and administrators and academic leaders really wanted BC to be able to be. And so we're going to talk about design, you know, the technical aspects of it and all the tools that Cidi Labs bring, but being able to visualize what it means to have a team of learning designers, instructional developers, and media producers in a design, and being able to scale that has just been hugely important to us to really rapidly grow as a center and take on OPMs and really put the focus on student learning, good design, and great relationships with faculty.
I'm going to hand it over to Kenneth for a bit to talk about what DesignPLUS is.
Yeah, so as we get into talking about Boston College's use of the tools, we thought it might be useful for any of you who are not familiar with our suite of tools to kind of get an intro into kind of how they work. So I'm going to start here initially with a blank Canvas page, or not, sorry, a blank Canvas page, just a normal Canvas page. So we've got some images, we've got some headings, some links, etc., just the kind of content you build with Canvas. But DesignPLUS is a suite of 3 tools. The main one that we're going to kind of look at today is this DesignPLUS sidebar. that you can actually open up here in the top right corner that gives you a variety of tools that you can use as you're working through content. If you're a brand new user, there are walkthroughs built into it to kind of help you get to know the tools. But here we have in the sidebar kind of 5 main panels. So we've got adding new content, we've got editing content, we've got some accessibility and usability features and checks. We've got some helps and tutorials. Any of you who are like me and like to get under the hood a little bit, we've got a bunch of advanced tools that you can choose to turn on as a user. But we've got the basic content here. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit larger there so we can see it. So if I'm getting started and want to kind of add some life and some fun to this content, we do have like this getting started section where I could do something like applying a theme, which that's kind of the basic look and feel of the content. And once you add something, it moves you over to this edit section where you can work with any element that kind of based on where your cursor is. So I could either, change the theme. So there are a variety of themes that you can make available at the institution level that you can choose from. I can add things like a banner image or navigation sections, or I can, easily remove those. I could move over to this banner title section, which is where my cursor is, and say that this is going to be part of week number 1. And, I can adjust the title here. Really, it's just giving you a variety of tools to kind of quickly transform. You can still do things in the editor itself because we're just using Canvas's native editor. But anytime I find games I don't like to play in Canvas's editor, we make some additional options available over here on the sidebar. If I'm working with just like a general heading, I can adjust heading level. We have like an icon picker with like over 2,000 icons that have been keyword indexed and categorized. So I can come in and I can, if I can type today, I can search for, different icons that I could add in to add some life to it. I can come in and if I select like a link, I can easily work with the link, or I can work with the list and drag and drop and change items or adjust its style, or I can select an image and I can come make sure that that image has appropriate alternative text, or I could change that image, or I can, come in and say, I want this to be a specific size and I want it floated to the left of the text and I want a nice round border style to it. So there's a lot that you can do with existing content to quickly kind of transform it. But one of the things that Tim and John are going to talk a lot about today are working with templates. And so if I go ahead and I'm working with a brand new page, there's a variety of other ways I can get started. So I can come in and I could add in a template. Now, this is a pre-built piece of content, so I might have like a template syllabus or other templates that I can pull in, and I can just choose that. It's going to drop it there in the content. Or I could start by kind of building in pieces. So I could choose a theme like we did earlier, and then I can start to add content blocks, which are kind of pre-configured chunks of content that you can add in. So that might be things like objectives or readings or lectures or, assignments, so you have those basic pieces and you can build your own blocks at the institution level to customize these. We can also have fun with other blocks. So, I might need, some columns with some icons in it, or, we've just got a variety of, like image galleries. So these will make it so that you can put in images that when users click on them, they become larger. We've got a variety of things like, cards that you can add in that you can play with their style, etc. So it just gives you starting points that you can very easily drop into the content to help users get a good start, kind of help with that carrying over the institutional branding, and just kind of help with that fun that you can do inside of Canvas. So there's a quick overview. If you want to learn more about DesignPLUS, feel free to reach out to us. You can visit us at cidilabs.com. And, we can arrange a demo if you want to learn more. But with that, I will turn it back over.
Thanks, Kenneth. I'm going to find my way back here. Okay. So the next phase here that John's going to talk about is kind of how we went from this presence of DesignPLUS and how we use that to get buy-in from the people who needed to sort of allow us to keep building the way we wanted to build. Go ahead, John.
It was, yeah, and it's kind of just what I say, and I really can't emphasize that enough, that it really allowed us to distinguish ourselves from OPMs who are so cookie cutter. And what we found was because we're able to give a lot of scaled boutique designs, and so faculty were very happy to be able to work and get exactly what they wanted and go through a design process in a positive way for the first time. And so that got reported back up that this was a great learning experience, that they really enjoyed being able to literally have a meeting with Tim and have their designs and their ideas be implemented right in front of them, as opposed to an OPM where it's just kind of dragged on and didn't really kind of go anyplace. And so that very positive faculty experience of it was fed up to academic leadership, which in turn really encouraged them to pivot more of their courses and programs towards us then. And it really comes a lot down to DesignPLUS providing that toolkit for customization and innovation. And different programs and different courses and then different faculty all wanted their own kind of customizations. And how do you do that? Having a toolkit to be able to do that makes all the kind of difference. That keeps faculty happy, also keeps programs happy because there's a standardization around colors and themes and stuff like that. And that overall positive experience, and then the visual element of it, being able to clearly show the difference between a not great OPM design course and then one of our boutique DesignPLUS infused courses, just made the case for us and really has allowed us to kind of just push all those aside and really become the sole focus of online at BC.
So, early on, this is back in, 2018 or so, we were working with a variety of some of our first online programs. And again, this online program context is important because that may be not where you're at. You may be rolling out DesignPLUS for all faculty just in blended courses and so forth. This is where we started. So it shaped a bit of how we progress. Now we're getting to the place where we are rolling it out to everybody on campus. So just keep that in mind a bit as we talk about this, because I think our priority was, how do we give an online program a particular brand that made it feel like you knew you were in this program. It gave right on the homepage a clear sense of identity. And so this gave me a way to work with themes right off the bat and get some imagery in there and give it a color scheme and so forth that allowed us to start working with distinctive programs. And eventually we started to get a little bit behind the scenes a bit with the CSS, because there are opportunities to add some custom CSS, and I was comfortable doing that. We did a few things to give a couple of other layout options and do things that went beyond, so this image sort of behind the text is a little bit of our own customization. There are options now to do some of that with DesignPLUS itself. But we really wanted to work with programs to give them the sense of, this is how we want to represent ourselves. Some people wanted more of a clean, simple, abstract kind of image. Some people wanted something that was much more BC, and we were able to kind of work with them on what fit them best and what colors they preferred and that kind of thing. We also did a little bit of customization in the first version of DesignPLUS with a sort of a vertical tabbed interface that allowed us to show things in some slightly different ways, but now that's all part of the default DesignPLUS in the new version. And so we're happy to have quite a few more options now that we didn't have when we started. And that's just a sort of shout out to the DesignPLUS group, that they have been continuing to evolve and respond to ideas we had or things we were interested in. And of course, I've done this major overhaul in the last couple of years that now we're in a very new place in how we can roll this out and enable people to be designers on their own.
And
this is just another.
Tim, just to say, the module homepage list is by far the most popular tool we encounter at face-to-face faculty with DesignPLUS, by far. That's been a big hook to get a lot of faculty interested in layout and design and all that kind of thing. That's something that really, really resonates with a whole bunch of people. So if we're picking any particular technology of DesignPLUS to roll out, it would be that one.
And I think that makes up for some, what it does is give you this clear sense of sort of mental model for the whole course right on the homepage, rather than having to click into modules and seeing a big list of sort of expanded, sort of list of stuff. This gives you a much more manageable way to introduce your students to a course. And I think that's been really helpful. And even at the module level, we've used the module progress bar to give people a better sense of context when they're in a module. This is something that Canvas doesn't do very well by default. And because of some of the customizations options that we have through DesignPLUS, we also added a little hidden gem that Kenneth can explore later. But this is really just giving you a sense of which module you're in, which is a basic kind of contextual cue for people to remember, okay, this is where I'm at here, this is how far I'm along, and it just helps people know where they are in a particular course. And finally, we also just used it to kind of give us a better toolkit for developing visual, other kinds of visual cues throughout a course that might help reinforce particular themes or recurring kinds of learning activities or other angles that people might have in a particular course. So it just gave us more to work with as we were collaborating with faculty, figured out what would help with them, and then implement that quickly into a course. So that's kind of where we got to as we were building early on online programs. But of course, 2020, a lot of things changed very quickly. And so John's going to talk a little bit about what happened during the pandemic and how that affected the way we use DesignPLUS.
Thanks, Tim. So basically, we're founded September 2019. Tim did a lot of the work you saw right there then in that semester, figured out a whole bunch of stuff. The pandemic happens, we have to pivot to online, and this is where really the templates come into play. So Tim and our executive director, Brian Slerner, were able to build out a draft template. They were able to populate in all the Canvas sites, so we were able to move the institution online, as I'm sure many of you can remember. But the real legacy of that was A, developing a template, and B, getting faculty used to having a design in their course. And so that's where a lot of the legacy for the support for the module outline table. So people really liked that from the template and wanted to kind of keep using it. But really what it did as well is got faculty used to using it, but got administrators used to, hey, faculty can do this and students can like it and it can go totally fine. So what happened then was we were able to put over 418 courses together over a year. A lot of faculty held on to those courses and kept on using them. So like I said earlier, BC was very reticent about online, and suddenly the whole institution went online and everything went well. Students were happy, faculty were happy with what they were using, and we were able to get our foot in the door with regard to a lot of faculty in face-to-face courses, being interested in online, interested about Canvas design and how design can be effective as a learning experience. If you want to move on, Tim. So that's just an example of it there. So again, a lot of the issues that Tim was talking about there, but the interesting thing there is that faculty didn't have to go into design tools and make all the changes and edits. They just had to open it up, and we're able to create like, kind of learning outcomes, content here, video here, that kind of thing. So that met faculty a lot of the way there with regard to getting content ready for an online course. And because Tim was able to build it out in design tools, faculty didn't be able to work in design tools to do that. So I know some of you are concerned about that, about knowledge for faculty and engaging them. That really wasn't that much of an issue because we were able to then change our faculty programming and development to just get them into editing Canvas pages rather than having to go into design tools and change that. So that was great. The more wider impact of it has been is that we're able to change and move all our summer programming completely online. So that went from, as I say, 9 courses in 2019 to actually it's a little bit more. They added a bunch more. So it's over 200 now. I should say they added a bunch to Shirley, our colleague. So in the space of a couple of years, the institution has moved this entire summer online. And again, to go back to the very beginning, this was not an online institution at all, and very pushing back against that to now a whole semester is now being put online. For different academic programs, that solves so many different problems. And it's really all down to the template, because most of these summer courses are taught by PhD students who have no experience in teaching, let alone designing and developing their own course. With a template, that solves so many of the problems because it's all clearly laid out thanks to Tim's designs. And so the learning designer is then able to work with the faculty in a more one-on-one way with a clear template and talk them through each kind of step. What we find a lot is that the faculty, the PhD students, are able to go in and get most of the work done themselves, and then meeting with a learning designer to talk through simple different activities. So that allows for huge ramp up in scaling. And so our faculty development and learning design is basically based on the templates that Tim develops in design tools. It allows for this huge increase in scale, gets us huge goodwill from academic units because it solves so many problems for them about a lot of our student athletes being able to get to courses, a lot of departments that have very important courses that students fail out of and need to retake again, but then they can't get faculty into campus over the summer to teach it, or students to be on campus. It solves all those kind of problems for them. And it's really all facilitated in my mind by having a really good template that students are going to be successful in learning at, and that faculty are on board with using for their teaching practice. And there's an example of what we're able to kind of spin out thanks to Tim's great designs.
And so I think that really led us to a new phase, in the sense that suddenly our original model of only learning designers were in DesignPLUS. They would build courses for faculty. Faculty would mainly do some edits in the content, but it was mostly, initially we were just kind of cautious in how we were rolling it out, and it was focused on online. Once the pandemic happened, that everybody now, a lot more people had access to DesignPLUS and we're seeing courses in DesignPLUS, and that started shifting us towards, well, we need to start thinking about how could we make this available in some other ways. And the precursor with that was really to think about how are we building patterns that we could start to use in more ways than just online courses. And a first example of this was working with our a business school, because they decided they wanted to have a common homepage for every course. They were doing a kind of revamp of their core courses, and they wanted to have more consistency across these courses. So we ended up implementing just a homepage design for them. And this was one where they didn't even need to have DesignPLUS open, but we had everybody started with the same homepage, and we shared it in Canvas Commons, so they could easily drop it in. But the program, it was kind of an entry point for us to have larger conversations with this program about not just the homepage and how that looked and how it gave them a kind of brand, but also how it might encourage people to start using modules and use other, sort of think about design in Canvas in a broader sense. And so this was what the template looked like. It was just very easy to edit, didn't actually require DesignPLUS, but it was giving us, DesignPLUS was there in the background, giving this template. And this we felt like was a low barrier way for a lot of people just to think about the design of their Canvas sites more generally, making a friendly, welcoming, clear, open homepage as the starting point, but then getting people to think about other parts of their Canvas design. And so all they had to do was import it from Canvas Commons, and then they were on their way and they could easily edit it without DesignPLUS. So that was just because we felt like we weren't ready to support 100 faculty or how many faculty it was, 100 courses with DesignPLUS yet, but we got a lot of benefit from using the template on the back end for them. And we had a couple hundred courses suddenly having the benefits of DesignPLUS right off the bat. And then we started at this point, we're starting to really build out a design system that allowed us to manage some of our customizations and all these different ways of the things we were learning, these patterns that people developed as they were building online courses, and thinking about how are we going to manage this over time, because we'd like to be using this more. So some of it was just me going in and standardizing some of the ways we customize the CSS a bit, but it was also packaging up some blocks. Since the great thing about DesignPLUS is you can create these pre-built blocks, and those become patterns that people can drop in really easily. And those reflect teaching practices that people have identified as effective. And that becomes now a common system where people can draw on that without having to start from scratch every time. And so just a few examples of the themes. These are themes that, where the image is editable, and this is kind of standard DesignPLUS where you have a banner, but then you're able to decide which image you might want to have go with it. And that gave us some that's easy for people to edit on their own. We have some others that have background images that are a little bit more locked down, in a sense that they're not really meant they're really meant for programs where it's meant to be standardized. So I think that's a distinction where some cases you want faculty to be able to edit everything. Sometimes you want it to be fairly consistent and a little less editable, where in our case, we're using the CSS in the background to kind of lock it down a little bit. So that's not going to be typical for every kind, but it just gave us this ability to really reflect the particular kind of imagery and interests of any theme. And so these are just some variations on our typical kind of styles of banner images that we developed over the course of working with different programs.
We worked
And
with,
then,
oh, sorry,
yeah,
Tim,
go ahead.
just to say, we worked with the nursing school. They wanted a custom home or template for their face-to-face courses. And we spent all our sessions arguing over which image. Well, they were arguing over which image to use. Not when, as regards to organization of pages or exam, nothing. No, they were all like, "Oh, whatever you think, that's fine." It was really the image that really resonated with them, and the ability to pick different ones and test it out and everything. That's what they really focused on, as something they spent a lot of time in doing. So it might appear kind of flippant and not that important, but the faculty and programs, it actually is really important and really matters a lot to them. And that's something they invest a lot of time and energy in, and be able to see those updates immediately is a real great way to hook and engage academic units.
And this is I've been managing quite a bit of CSS over this, and this is not what you have to do when you're using DesignPLUS. I would just mention it. This is something that we had to figure out because we had a lot of custom things. But most of what you can do just with DesignPLUS. There's so much there that can allow you to customize and then package that up and share with each other. This was something more recent where we were building specific blocks for faculty to guide their students in how they might use what's an appropriate use of AI in their course. And so that's where we, once we built a few of those more standardized, scalable things, now we're thinking about, okay, how are we going to move this from the online programs and a few people who have sort of carried over from there to the rest of the campus? So we're really thinking about how do we help develop learning paths for faculty that make sense to them, that we can support, that will scale, and thinking about different kinds of defaults. Canvas doesn't, at least in our case, doesn't have a lot to go on when you get a blank Canvas site, and we're trying to queue up some of these designs that might be unique to a program for a new course, so you don't have to start without anything to go on right away. And finding ways for people to navigate what makes sense for them. How much do they want to take on? Where do they need to start? Where do they need to go? This is evolving still as we try to understand different types of users on campus, but helping them find the path that makes sense. Setting up these defaults where maybe we have the business school template is just what they get, and then they can decide if they want to keep it or move it, do something else with it. And that may help people not have to start with a blank page every time they have a new Canvas site. And what we're finding is that more and more programs really they're interested in providing a template for their program. And this is just an example of our first year writing program where this has been helpful for them because they have 20 or 30 new teachers every year because it's taught by graduate students a lot, and then a few other adjuncts or others. And they really needed to scaffold the process of learning how to teach in the program by providing a template that queued up a whole bunch of basics for them, and so that a new teacher doesn't have to start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. And that provides more consistency, but also, I think, improves the quality of the program. And this last example I would show is just to showcase a bit of what we've been able to do with new features. This is, fairly new are these cards embedded in columns, which gives us a couple different ways to lay out a homepage. Instead, in this case, it wasn't quite as relevant to have a module homepage list because we didn't have a lot of content in the course. It was really to give people immediately a sense of like, these are the big categories of things that you should pay attention to. This is a brand new, Messina College is a brand new college at BC, a 2-year school for low-income first-gen students. So having a very clear, inviting homepage that reflected the images and sort of the sense of the place that they're going to be felt really important. And it was great to have Kenneth kind of read my mind and know that this was something that's going to be helpful, because I was moving towards thinking, oh, it'd be great to have cards and in this kind of layout, and then it was there. So I appreciate that. That's just a sign of that Kenneth and his team is really talking to people and in touch with what our needs are, and then responding with things that help us build interesting pages. So finally, we're just trying to we're still migrating kind of old legacy courses to the new sidebar. Kenneth will talk about some tooling that is going to really help us with that process. And we're trying to always, keeping things fresh and responding to new courses and new programs, but also how are we going to sustain this now with thousands of courses that have DesignPLUS applied? What's that trade-off between innovation and sustainability? And I think this automation piece is coming in. We're struggling to figure out, okay, how are we going to update all these pages that we have? And fortunately now, Kenneth and team have built this a tool for migrating to the new version that's going to help us quite a bit. So that's what I'll pass it over to Kenneth to talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, so for any of our customers that have been using the tools for years, last year, this is the whole time has lost its meaning. We released a new version of the sidebar, which added a whole bunch of additional functionality and fixed some things that had always kind of bothered me. And, but when you move content from the older sidebar to the new sidebar, there is some upgrading that has to happen to that content. This allows the old content to still continue to run and function just as it did before, but when you want to use some of the new things, you can quickly upgrade it. And it was actually a conversation with Tim and John at a conference where I finally figured out, okay, how can we make this available? So we do have a course-wide upgrade tool that will actually be coming for any of our users who have the beta features enabled in their user settings next week. And so what it does is that from the course settings page, you can open up the sidebar, you can have it scan through your content, and it lets you know what content you have that has legacy content in it. Here you can see the list of items. You can choose to select all of the items and then review them. You can also review them individually. You can see there in one of the columns that you can see whether it has legacy content or new content or both. You can see what type of content is, what its status is. You can also see if it's published. But then if you start reviewing them, you get a little bit of a preview. So Tim, if you'll go ahead and jump to the next slide there. So you can see here is a preview of the upgraded content, and you'll notice there are tabs, so I could also change over and see the original content, so you can see the before and after. Along the top, I can just choose to approve that, and then that'll move you to the next page, so you can look at it and approve it. We do want you to look at it, because you never know for sure if it's going to, everything's going to work smoothly. We've covered the basics and how we built the tools and envisioned them, but if you do have a bunch of custom stuff, there might be some additional things that need to be tweaked. If you do find that there's an issue as you're looking at the preview before and after, there is a report a problem option that you can choose. This allows you to let us know. You can type out a subject, give us a description, drop in screenshots, etc. But the lovely thing about this form is it will also send us the HTML before the upgrade and the HTML after the upgrade, so that as we're looking into what didn't work well, we can look right at the code to be able to give you some feedback of whether, and we can figure out whether this is something that our tool needs to adjust, or if it's something that's completely unique or something odd that happened on that page, etc. I will note that if you do have things that are a little bit odd, but they're unique to the way that you did things, and I've worked with Tim for some of this as well, there is the ability as part of this upgrade process to have some code that runs before and or after the upgrade. So if there's anything custom you need to do, you can help automate some of that so that it fixes it in that upgrade process as well. So anyway, yeah, that's something fun that keep an eye on the release notes for, but it is coming out to those who are willing to play in beta in next week's release.
Yeah, something I'm super excited to play around with. And I think that in the upgrade process, being able to tweak some things, there were a lot of things that I didn't realize I didn't know what I was doing when I started, and there were a lot of things I needed to clean up as I went along. And the upgrade process was a good excuse to do that. And if you're comfortable with a little bit of JavaScript, you can really go in and catch a bunch of that stuff. And it's a good excuse to just, tidy up and clean up things, fix a few things on the way in. So Kenneth has been great about accommodating lots of different requests that I have to modify things and help make that process smoother. So just
that
before we
actually-
finish,
I was just going to chime in that actually describes the whole new sidebar thing. Is when I first built the old one, there were a lot of things that I theoretically knew what I wanted to do, but once we actually got doing it, started to learn that there were some limitations to that early method, which is why we do have an upgrade process. So anyway, back to you.
Yeah, and before we open it up for Q&A, just a few takeaways. I think that as we've been saying, DesignPLUS gave us this flexible toolkit, and it really helped us scale good design in a way that fit Boston College in our context. And that's really been a game changer for us, I think, in the way that we could make Canvas even more useful than it might be outside of the box for lots of different use cases. And then we found that this kind of the good design that we were able to share can be this entry point for talking about good teaching. So it was often a kind of hook for people to say, I really want this kind of a homepage. This looks nice. But then to start talking about what's happening after the homepage. How are you organizing the rest of your site? Because that matters maybe even more than the homepage, but it's a way to kind of package that up as, let's talk about your Canvas site as a whole and what kind of experiences you're trying to create there. How does that support your teaching? And that once you find some things that work, creating shareable patterns helps that spread further. So the more that we can help people start from what other people have learned and then riff off of that, or maybe innovate on top of that, you just get further and you don't have to spend as much energy reinventing the wheel. And we found that, our specific way of using DesignPLUS kind of became a product that we had to design itself, because it's going to be our particular way of implementing it. And we want to make sure that that's consistent, that it's well maintained. If we've done a fair bit of customization, so we need to be able to maintain that. But that is all enabled by having this product to start with that Cidi Labs gives us. And then we want to make sure that we treat it as sort of keep up for the care and maintenance of our particular version of it. So I guess we can open it up for questions now.
Yeah, I can help share some of the ones that we've gotten in the Q&A. The first one is about the size of your team, specifically around the ones who helped move the 200+ courses online initially.
So that's, I saw that question. So it fluctuates a lot, but altogether it's probably about under 10. And so the way that kind of worked, there's some legacy courses where we go and we help the faculty import it from from summer to summer. But with the summer courses, the faculty are selected and we get a list of them by January. By the start of February, they're put into a training program where they're guided through online course development, along with building a course out in the Canvas template. So for that process, there's 3 learning designers and a media producer and a grad assistant assigned to them. And in general, it's really just about getting the faculty to go along. So what we love about the templates is a lot of the building out work is complete, and it's really about getting the faculty to think through what learning activities and content. Once they select that, then they're just adding it, it's just a page editor, then you're just putting it in. So that's why we really like the template. It allows us to scale up that development of courses without having to hire like a million learning designers to get things up. But the key person there is a project manager. So the process kind of allows only for a handful of people to be directly involved. That most of the faculty are pretty fine. They kind of get the main idea because the template is laid out. We structured the syllabus so that as they're filling out their syllabus, they're taking the same headings that's in the template as well, so they can match up what they're putting in their syllabus to the template as well. So by the end of April, most of the courses are finished with a couple of meetings with a learning designer. It doesn't require as much hands-on support as you might think it does. But then to kind of keep them going over, we've grad assistants that go in and help with any technical issues or help them update any pages or anything like that. But as Tim said with the templates, we designed it in DesignPLUS, but then the faculty are not in DesignPLUS to go build it out, and that makes it a lot easier as well.
We have two questions about the banner images with text overlay, which I wondered if Kenneth wanted to show. One question is, did DesignPLUS help with the customization of the banner images that have the logo and the text overlay? And the other question is, how do you create the text fields in the banner image that faculty can edit?
So the versions with the text over the image is something that I built in with some custom CSS. So that's something that I was just able to do on my own because I have a background in that. And so that wasn't, I mean, I think I probably got help from Kenneth various times if I had specific questions about how DesignPLUS was working. And in terms of editing the fields, those still, even with that version, you're always editing the fields within the banner in the sidebar. I just happened to kind of affect what was happening underneath that. So it's a bit of, in our cases, we wanted to have a BC logo as well as a background image, and that was easier to do in the CSS. And that's why if somebody was asking about whether the templates are available for other people to use, and we don't make them available because they have BC logos baked into them, and they wouldn't be, I'm assuming, useful for you on your campus. If people haven't, if they're interested in some of the if you have somebody who can work with CSS directly, I'm able to share that. I just need to update it a little bit with the new version. So if you're interested in what I'm doing with the CSS, feel free to reach out. And I have a GitHub repo that's a little bit out of date that I could share with some examples of how we've done that if you're just looking for a pattern on that. So it's, in some ways, that's a little bit unique to our uses. And I don't want you to feel like you have to get into the CSS to use DesignPLUS, but there are a few specific things we did that are a little bit unusual. So
yeah, and there's a lot of things you can do with the sidebar. So we do have a background tool that allows you to set a background image for content, including being able to, apply overlays that make sure that there's sufficient color contrast between the text that's over the image. We also have a DesignPLUS library, which you can go pull resources from. And while none of, Boston College's specific examples are in there, there are some other pieces there. And we could potentially work with Tim to take some of those designs and make them in a way that they could just be pulled from the library and made available.
Yeah, and I would say part of why I did that in CSS earlier is because the background tool wasn't available. That's a fairly new thing. So there's some things I've done in the past that I'm kind of thinking, is there a better way to do this that's more DesignPLUS native? And so I think those are conversations I'd love to have with Kenneth.
Yeah, and the background tool was a while coming because I had to figure out a way to. The challenge with putting images behind text is making sure they're accessible. And that can all depend on the image. And so it took me a while to programmatically figure out a way I could read the image and, calculate and everything for you so that that you're getting the appropriate contrast. So.
We have a couple questions about how you set up templates for different departments. For example, basic skills faculty can see some templates versus CTE faculty see their own templates.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, right now the original model again was only learning designers had access to it. So we all kind of put all the various templates, they were all available within the same instance. Now that we're rolling it out to the rest of the university, we're starting to think about whether we should be doing that more at a sub-account level, but we just haven't gotten organized enough to figure out if we're going to do that. So I think that may make sense to just not have people be confused about which ones are available to them kind of as a general user and which ones are more, say, online course specific or whatever, just so there's not an overwhelming list there. So I think the sub-account approach might make sense for us long term.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would just say the commons, we only really use that for places where we want a faculty member to import it or somebody on their staff to import it into a page where they're not going to edit it. It just kind of makes that process easier. You could use commons, I think, for things that where you might want to have an entire course as a, sort of a template. But if you have individual page templates, now you can do that. I mean, the way of, it handles it within DesignPLUS is pretty easy. So you may want to, I think we use Commons in a very specific way. DesignPLUS really handles the distribution of templates pretty well. So I think that may be the best way to do it for a lot of people.
Yeah, and just as a templates in general, so because all of the content that you build with DesignPLUS is just built into Canvas, it's compatible with any of the ways you build and share content already in Canvas. So that can be Canvas Commons, that can be Blueprint courses, that can be, Canvas gives you the ability to create a default template that applies to every brand new course that's created. As you copy courses, etc. All of that works as well. But then DesignPLUS has what we call customizations courses. And you get one that's our primary customizations, the course that's applied to whatever account level the tools are initially installed at, where you can build templates and content blocks and all of these different pieces. But then you can also at a sub-account level add what we call an extended customizations course. So they can have the blocks and pieces and templates that are available for everyone, but then they can also have some blocks and templates and stuff that are unique to a given sub-account. And then we even have what we call shared customizations courses. So let's say you have a team of designers that work on courses across all sorts of accounts that you want some specific templates that they're working with. There's ways you can do that as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can look at it. And so it just kind of depends on the approach you want to take.
And just to say for how we kind of get, I think there's another question about how to get templates in. So for some programs we're extremely hands-on with, so we do it. For others, as Tim said, we send out the instructions on how to do it, Canvas Commons, and then their own team go and do it. But it's not too much of a concern because once you have a big rollout, you've got the work done, because I don't know what institutions are like, but the same courses are kind of happening with mostly the same faculty. And so you're just importing the content. So it's a big push once, and either you do it or you train other people in doing it, but then they just importing the same content again and again. And again, it depends on the intellectual property. There's been some issues we've had around intellectual property. So if does it belong to the school or does it belong to the faculty member? And if in one of our examples, it belongs to the school. And so they can just import the content for different faculty that are arriving, and they have their own people that kind of do that. But basically it just depends on the instance that we're working with. So I think somebody had a question about labs and things like that. So for that, we try and train them in doing it, and they go and they own that. That's the same for like continuing ed folks and stuff like that. So it really depends on who you're engaging with. But it's multivariate. There's no kind of one size fits all, because people have different technical abilities, and are people around much or the same people around much. That really affects how you roll it out.
Yeah, it sounds like you're answering the question that was next, was kind of how do faculty instructors editing using DesignPLUS, and the concern was, with a decently large program, I would find it very hard to imagine a majority of our instructors would be willing or able to use the tools. Do you have any feedback about things that have been successful? I know you've talked a lot about getting buy-in and showing examples for getting faculty on board.
I mean, I think
it depends really, doesn't it? Sorry, Tim. Yeah, it depends. So there's always a few nerds that are really into it and want to get access to it. But for the vast majority, we don't. They can go and access it if they want, but we don't advertise it. That Tim is at design, so they don't need to use design tools to get access to it, because it is hard, because it is complicated. But we are finding more faculty interest in it. So what we're going to try to do is provide some faculty development programming around using design tools. So people have the templates and all the different things they can kind of do with it, for the reason that you said, that it is a lot of work and there's specific design principles to apply in using it. And so developing programming around that to support those faculty that want to do it. Sorry, Dave.
And that's new for us in the sense that we're rolling it out in a broader way, and we're developing those, really trying to be deliberate about saying, helping people identify how much time they want to spend, what are their interests, giving them different paths where they say, if you just want this, well, maybe just focus on the homepage, or maybe if you want to do more, here's kind of what you're committing to, and we'll provide hopefully some more kind of online asynchronous courses that could walk people through specific skills that they need. We're kind of experimenting with that right now to figure out what's going to make sense to scale beyond the sort of more high touch approach that we have for online courses. So that's in process for us.
And just a couple of things from my side. We've seen a lot of success with institutions when they will use the tools to develop like faculty training. And so faculty are going through these courses that are really well designed and laid out. And then faculty say, hey, how do I get my course to look like that? And then they're more intrinsically motivated to learn that. I will also note that one of the big things that we pushed as we did this new sidebar was there are helps and tutorials and walkthroughs and stuff built into all of the different tools. And so there's a lot of help resources. So you can do a very quick intro to faculty to say, hey, here's the basics. But then the tools themselves have tutorials and walkthroughs and helps and stuff built in along the way as well.
So we've got 1 more minute, real quick. Are you using any particular rubric to evaluate good course design, and is Cidi Labs helping in some way to meet those criteria? Like, are you using Quality Matters or an OLC rubric?
I think it's Quality Matters, Tim, is it? We use our own version of Quality
I
Matters.
think we have a kind of our own version that pulls from a few of those, the big ones. So the learning design team would do a review at the end of an online course and run through that rubric. And I think that certainly the way that that using Cidi Labs, using DesignPLUS helps create a easy to navigate, well organized course, meets some of those requirements for helping students be successful in a course. Beyond that, you know, with people who are designing that outside of online programs, there's a lot less, I think, oversight of that and less in terms of rubrics and so forth. But we're trying to encourage a little bit from a bit more of a carrot rather than a stick approach of saying like, hey, these are some things we know work well. Your students will respond well. You'll get better, you know, sort of evaluations when they can navigate your site well and it's attractive. So we're sort of handling those with slightly different approaches.
And one last question about approaches is there a different approach to working at a college, not at a university level, with a variety of modes, face-to-face, hybrid, lab online, and many outside professional faculty with range of different online experience? You kind of touched on this earlier.
Yeah, we work very closely with the School of Continuing Education. So that's all their faculty are adjunct. They're all pretty much all their courses are online, a lot of professionals as well. So again, that's where the template is really useful. So there we work very closely with the program directors and deans to come up with very solid templates and very solid, very deep. So the template is kind of gets the faculty about 80% of the way there because it has to be in alignment. They don't have time. And so that's where, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but like there's a clear pattern for each program that school runs, and having the template really allows us to do that. So when the adjunct professional faculty comes in, then you're having conversations around, okay, what kind of content do you want to put in? What do your learning activities look like? And that's all kind of laid out in the Canvas site template for them. Whereas opposed, we work with some programs where it's extremely boutique. We're working very closely with the program directors and the individual faculty. So it's a 6-month development process for the course. And so learning designers meeting with them and engaging with them about it all. And so that's kind of how we use the Canvas templates to be able to achieve that. You know, the templates make working with, so for the professional school, that's a 3-month course development process. And a lot of times you're not getting that much time from faculty. That's where a template can just bridge a whole bunch of the gap, but then you're meeting with the program director constantly to keep updating and changing the template based on their students' needs and needs of the market and all that kind of thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. We do have some upcoming webinars. I'm going to have that slide come up real quick. We have some webinars building on these ideas about connecting, you know, practical tools, tips. The next one is on designing for a sense of belonging. And then we have one on the same topic on scaling course design. So that's one you definitely don't want to miss if you're talking about that. And then again, we're going to be doing templates. So all of these topics, we're going to keep building on these. We also have a number of events we're going to be showing up at, so that list is there. I do want to give a big thank you to Tim and John for joining us today. This has been really great to be able to see the examples and see what you've built. And if anybody, I know, Tim, you said they can reach out to you if you have questions. I'll give anybody their contact if you want to reach out. But thank you for coming today, and we hope to see you again on the other side of the screen soon.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Kenneth.
Have a great day.
Awesome.